Jessica, for those who don't know me, and this is our 101 class. So it's going to be basic definitions and concepts for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I shorten to DEI a lot because, wow, what a mouthful to repeat. So you can go to the handout. I'm going to introduce myself really quickly. I go by Zahra in the SCA. I have an educational background in public policy, rhetoric, and writing for nonprofits. I've worked in both educational curriculum design and corporate documentation, and I've participated in various diversity initiatives at all levels, both as part of a larger group or council, but also as a single individual who's spearheading something new. I am a person whose life has been intensely impacted by concepts of inclusion and equity. So really quickly, I want to flash back and tell you guys a little bit about like me at 5. So an absolute hellion, I have been assured by many family members. I was loud, I was very talkative, hated bedtime. I was also the only person of color in my family. And when you're 5, that doesn't really mean a lot to you. It takes a long time to understand what that means in a greater picture. And it takes a long time to understand the kind of questions that no kid is really prepared to answer, which are things like, how did you get such an even tan? To which I would usually shrug and say birth, and everyone would laugh. Or how long does it take to curl your hair? To which I would usually say it's instantaneous, and everyone would laugh again. But what was really easy to understand, even at 5, is feeling different, feeling excluded. Kids pick up on those kinds of things like that. And I didn't just get it from other kids. The fewer family events that my mother and I were invited to, and the fewer adults there who tried to engage with me, the more I felt like I didn't belong. And belonging is really at the heart of what we're here to talk about today. The SCA needs to be a space where people feel like they belong regardless of their social groups, their identities, where they have equal access to opportunities, and where they get treated with courtesy, dignity, and respect, no matter how they're different. We want this space to be a fun, safe place for everyone to enjoy our hobby. But we can't pretend like we exist in some kind of perfect utopia when we step into an SCA event. There will still be bias. We have to work hard to continuously promote values of equity and inclusion. So this particular class, like I said, definitions and concepts. We'll talk about what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually are. And we'll talk about some of the basic concepts that will help us understand some of the issues that are driving this need for attention in these areas. I have other courses as well. Email me if you want to know more about those. You can email me at equity@sca.org. You can message me on Facebook. I'm happy to chat more whenever you like. Again, email me if you need a large text handout or if you need the handout emailed to you. It's in chat and it's in the event right now. So let's get started. On the handout, you'll kind of see the DEI mission statement. This is just kind of our guiding light. This is why we created this position to begin with. My job is about education. I review policies to make sure that they're equitable and inclusive. I suggest new policies as needed. I help create training to go through the concepts, and I interface with people to learn how the SCA can further these concepts for people. I'm not investigatory. That is still firmly with the Seneschalate. I advise as needed. So if people feel uncomfortable or if they want advice on how to construct a complaint, you can come to me and I can do that. But investigation and reporting lies firmly with the Seneschalate, and that's not going to change. So let's jump right into the definitions. So diversity, at its most basic level, very simple. The presence of those who belong to different social groups and have different group identities. Some of those groups or identities are things that people can see easily, like race, physical disability, or assumed gender. Other social group identities are internalized and not always easy to see, like a disability socioeconomic status, or education level. We don't want diversity in the SCA to become a quota. We're not going to get a big white van and drive down the street collecting marginalized groups so that we can hit some imaginary number, 3 of them, no, just 2 of them. No, that's not what we want. Diversity is the natural outcome of having a truly equitable and inclusive society, not a quota. So let's talk about equity. Equity is about fairness, meaning equal access to opportunities in your organization for everyone, regardless of social group. I really want to highlight the difference between equality and equity because I think that can be very confusing for people. We learn pretty young that if things are equal, they're fair. You get a cookie, I get a cookie. You get to watch 30 minutes of television, I get to watch 30 minutes of television. The danger is that that really oversimplifies things as we get older. Here's the thing. Treating everyone exactly the same is not fair at all. Equal treatment erases our differences and promotes privilege. When people are different, the standards for fairness and success are different too. So, as you can see, I'm not what you call a runner. So if I came up to you and I was like, I'm training for a half marathon, you'd be like, wow, that's awesome. Get it, girl. You would totally understand if I was exhausted when you saw me. You would be totally, oh, that's fine. She's doing that. And so when I show up all like sweaty and gross, you'd be like, oh yeah, she's running. But if I came up to you as someone who's won the Boston Marathon several times and I'm like, oh, I'm training for a half marathon, would you be as lenient? Would you be okay with me always being exhausted? Or would you be like, oh, that's not a huge deal. You do this all the time. What's the big deal? The goalposts here are different. Things are inherently unequal. We know that on some level. The idea of equality aims to promote fairness, but that only works if everyone starts from the same place, wants the same things, and needs the same kind of help. There's a proverb that gets attributed to Einstein a lot, and that's, everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Equality works if everyone is the same, but we know they're not. Instead, we aim for equity. We want to give people what they need to be successful, and that means giving them different things. So equality is there being a bathroom, plausibly, for everyone. But equity is fair and equal access to that bathroom by adding, for instance, a ramp that makes it possible for those with mobility devices to get there. Equality is me saying, hey, thanks for coming to my class. You all get a medium t-shirt for showing up. And equity is me giving you a shirt that you can actually wear. Equality ignores the differences in our needs, and equity acknowledges them. And there will be no t-shirts. So let's move on to inclusion. Inclusion is about who you welcome and value. Inclusion speaks more to those with different identities being respected, expected, and integrated into an organization. If you don't look welcoming, most people won't come. And if you turn out to not be welcoming, if they do come, they won't stay. We want all people interested in research and recreation of pre-17th century history to feel welcomed. So if you look at the graphic on the handout, which I need to flip to the right page, you'll see that to be truly inclusive, we need to avoid bringing people in, but continuing to other them. This leads to tokenism, which is a perfunctory or symbolic method of bringing people in to give an appearance of diversity without actually valuing who they are as people. Their identity gets flattened and becomes one-dimensional so that they can fulfill some sort of quota, which, as we mentioned before, bad. We don't want that. If you think about that really typical argument of, well, I can't be racist. I have a Black friend, he's right here. We're invoking this idea that we're diverse, But by reducing people to only one or two facets of who they are, we've failed to be really inclusive. So based on that, basically, is the concept of inclusive excellence, which is very simply the recognition that the success of the SCA is dependent on how well we value, engage, and include the rich diversity of our membership. My job is to evaluate whether underrepresented members are also being underserved. Inclusive excellence changes the way that organizations have historically conceptualized diversity. We're moving away from that numerical goal, and the emphasis is on transforming into a vibrant community that embeds diversity throughout the institution. Inclusion is tremendously important. It reduces disadvantage, isolation, and discrimination. It is the foundation of a connected and cohesive society free from othering. And the work that we're doing in expanding DEI concepts has long-term value because we're aiming to address issues before they become issues. The benefits of prevention here far outweigh retrospective problem solving, which can be really costly, figuratively and literally. So those are our basic terms. I'm gonna pause really quick. Does anyone have any questions so far before we jump into our concepts? Looks like the handout was posted again. Thank you. I think we're set then. Nothing? Okay, we're good. All right, so we're gonna get into the concepts and we're gonna start with a biggie. We're gonna talk about privilege. So, a lot of people really struggle with the concept of privilege, and that's because the word privilege already means something to a lot of us. We think about it in terms of the silver spoon, a life handed to you. And most people don't identify with that. So there's an instinctive defensiveness that comes with it. What privilege actually is an unearned advantage enjoyed by one social group beyond the common advantage of others. So you can have privilege in some ways, and you can lack it in others. And this is true for mostly everyone. Privilege is often invisible to those who have it. So I want to conceptualize this within the SCA. So let's imagine a kingdom, a perfectly circular kingdom that totally doesn't exist. What if you lived right in the middle? So no in-kingdom event is more than, let's say, 3 or 4 hours from you. And that's at worst. Most of them are within 2 hours. So you don't have to plan for whole days of nothing but travel. You have the option to day trip most things if you really want to. And that cuts out your need for crash space, for gas money, for travel buddies, for paying for a hotel. And it lets you go to more events. If you're someone whose goals would be furthered by going to as many events as possible, it's a pretty big advantage. So let's look at another potential privilege, site availability. So if you're in a group that has a dedicated site and you want to start a new event, you're going to have an easier time planning that event if it's already there, it's in your price range, it fits all the things you want to do. But if you're in a group that's just starting up and you want to start a new event and you can't find a site, if the sites are too expensive, if the sites can't give you what you need, as in there's no space for, say, archery, or there's no ability to do any of martial activity, you're at a disadvantage. You might not be able to hold that event the way you want to. It might need to change, it might need to narrow its scope, it might not happen at all. And that disadvantaged group might have some difficulty moving forward without ever being able to hold any events. Or potentially they put on an event, but it's not what they wanted it to be. And so it never becomes established or well attended, and it has nothing to do with how hard they worked. It's just the luck of the draw as far as sites near them. So that's another example of privilege within strict SCA concepts. Kingdoms are arbitrary. Sometimes we follow state lines, but sometimes we don't. Whether or not you live in the center geographically of a kingdom has very little to do with anything you can control outside of joining, learning about your kingdom, and then moving. So let's look at how privilege crosses over into DEI concepts within the SCA. Right now, I am not in a wheelchair or any other mobility assistance device. So when I think about an event I want to go to, I don't really need to worry about the terrain. I don't need to scour the event's website and hope that someone posted about the building that it's in. I don't need to worry how far parking is. I don't need to worry how wide doorways are. I don't need to worry about any of that. That's a privilege. I don't use an assistive device at camping events, so I don't need to worry about finding a place to charge it. I'm not colorblind, so when people label things as the blue list, I know I can find it. These are all privileges. Now, conversely, I stand at a mighty 5'2". So I can't even put up my own tent by myself. If I'm gonna go to an event, I know that I'm gonna need to hunt someone else down and get help. And that means I don't get to show up whenever I want. I need to plan a little bit more. When I travel as a person of color, I'm aware of where I am in the world. I'm aware of what the cities around me look like. I'm aware of what the history of that is and whether or not I feel safe. I don't walk alone at night very much. Again, it's an issue of personal safety for me. And that's even more so if I'm in an area I don't know very well. So for all the ways I do have privilege, I lack it in other ones. Something to really remember is that comments like, I don't see color or similar are usually an indication of privilege because a person in a marginalized group doesn't really have the luxury of choosing to be blind to their own status. I cannot care as much as I want, but sooner or later it will be thrust back into my face and I'll go, oh yeah. Because that doesn't stop for me when I enter an SCA event. In an ideal world, it wouldn't matter. But we don't live in an ideal world. We bring all of that with us when we come to the SCA. It is not an escape for everyone in all ways. So there is one more note I want to really talk about. We've kind of contextualized privilege within the SCA. And you'll notice that I didn't talk about privilege in terms of peerage or rank. So there is privilege that comes with these things, but it's very different than the type of privilege we're talking about when I talk about things like where you live in a kingdom, whether you're in a barony or a shire. There's a difference between the idea that something has a platform and you have a rank that you've earned and you have a privilege that just, you were just born and that's the way life is. So while it is important to note that certain ranks and peerages, all peerages, come with responsibilities, it's not the same kind of privilege that we're talking about when we talk about unearned privilege versus earned privilege. So that could be a conversation in and of itself. I just want to touch on that really quickly, just to make sure that we're contextualizing this well for ourselves. So there is good news around the idea of privilege, the idea of having privilege, and that's we're in a really good position to lead others towards fairness, towards empathy, towards respectful behavior in our society. Your example carries more authority. You don't have to give a lecture or a lesson on stereotyping, but you can make this sort of thing stop. You can give the gift of empathy and fairness to members of that disadvantaged group, whatever it may be. Because privilege means you have a platform. You can use that platform to give a voice to the people who need it. So again, I'm going to stop. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone want me to talk a little bit more about what it looks like in the society? Or does anyone want to ask anything? I can't see you, so you'll have to write in the chat or put up your hand, by the way. So if anyone's like waving, I won't be able to see that. I think we're good. Okay. All right. I will stop after every concept, and then at the end, we'll stop again. But if no one has any questions, we'll be done pretty quickly. So moving on. Let's talk about unconscious bias. So on the handout, flip, flip, flip. We're going to do a really quick thought exercise. Oh my gosh. So there are two pictures here. I want you to imagine that I have just presented these two people to you and said, hey, you're going to work on a project with these two people. Now, you don't know anything about them besides the fact that I just showed you these two pictures. So what are your first impressions? What's the first thing that comes to mind? We're not going to share it. I just want you to really think about, you look at these two people, what's the first thing? Where do you go? So I'm going to tell you who they are. So here on the left, Oreo Kolo is a Kenyan activist living in South Africa. She's a graduate of Harvard Law. She's one of Time's 100 most influential people in 2014. She's a leading global technology expert, and she's Google's former policy manager for Africa. And over here, we have Bobak Ferdowsi, who is an MIT grad and systems engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. He's also flight director of NASA's Mars Science Lab Curiosity mission. So what initially came to mind when you looked at them? Did you imagine that they had or didn't have certain skills or credentials? When I told you their backgrounds, was that unexpected in some way? When I've taught this class before and people have chosen to share, sometimes people say things like, oh, I thought they looked artistic. I thought he would be fun to party with. I thought she might be good at music. People usually don't go to dark places, but I'm sure some people do. The idea is that we have nothing to go on except their pictures. But both of them represent best-in-class experts in their field. And if we made incorrect assumptions about them, our bias may have caused us to overlook the tremendous value that they can bring to a team. So unconscious bias is also known as implicit bias, and it's a mental model or shortcut that we aren't aware that we have. Decades of science tells us that unconscious bias operates in our brain at a very subtle level, well below our awareness or perception. So these biases aren't all bad. They help us make sense of the huge amount of information that we have to process every day. And they're based partly in human biology and partly on life lessons. Our brains are designed to assess verbal and visual cues to create shortcuts as we assess people and their capabilities. We all have biases. They help us understand the world around us, but they can lead us to create inaccurate judgments about the people around us. So an example in music, in the 70s, the Big Five orchestras, New York, Chicago, Boston, Cleveland, and Philadelphia, were made up of only 12% women. Judges were selecting more men from auditions because they unconsciously thought that their music sounded better than music from women. Eventually, the way that this gender bias was addressed was with blind auditions, which, very simply, were auditions held with a performer behind a screen. When they didn't actually start to see change very quickly, they noticed another potential thing, and they added a rug. So now the click that women's heels would make on the ground was also removed. So truly, all that the judges could hear was the music. Within a decade, there was substantial visible change. And by the year 2000, women made up more than 35% of the Big Five orchestras, a number which has since continued to grow. So addressing the unconscious bias by removing a data point that can trigger that bias led to significant gender diversity in this case. Another study that you've probably heard about in a different capacity because it's been done a few different times are fictional resumes sent out to employers. This particular one was in China. 21,000 fictional resumes. They presented the same person. 24 years old, single, university educated, currently employed. Similar educational background. The only difference was the name at the top. So some resumes had names that were typically Han Chinese, which is the majority in China, and others were Tibetan, Mongolian, Uyghur, other ethnic minorities in China. So the result of that experiment was to get the same number of callbacks as the Han Chinese names. Mongolian resume names had to send out 36% more. Uyghur had to send out 83% more, and Tibetan had to send out 121% more to get the same number of callbacks. These differentials in numbers were most pronounced in privately held companies, but they were seen as less unconscious bias and more just of a cultural norm. This is the way things are. That in itself is an ongoing bias. They've repeated that experiment a lot. They've done it with typically masculine names. They've done it with typically African-American names. They've done it several times. And every time it's pretty much given you the results that you would expect, in that people who had stereotypes attached to whatever marginalized group they were a part of didn't get as many callbacks, and they had nothing to go on beyond the idea that, well, this is the same person, but the name is going to be the thing that makes me make this choice about them. So let's talk a little bit about how to address it, right? Actually mitigating it. So you can interrupt it through awareness, right? Foundation of everything. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So taking a step back, looking at our cultural values, beliefs, perceptions, it's important. You can ask yourself questions like, why do I do things this way automatically? Why did I react to that this way? You can try to break the patterns that you know are biased, or try to move yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit. Education. You're all in a class right now. You're learning. You're gaining information through experience or education. Sometimes things that I'm saying might fit into your existing worldview, or sometimes there might be a little bit of discomfort there. But either way, you can take it and evaluate and address your own life experience, right? Learning is hard, but unlearning is really hard. So let's talk about skills. Very easy. It's the competencies that we're building that allow us to interact with others in a way that respects and values their differences. Flexible thinking, good communication, teamwork. These are all pretty base, but they're necessary in accommodating multiple lifestyles and needs. So, action, right? Slow down. Bias loves when we have to make decisions under pressure. It isn't called a snap judgment for nothing. We are hardwired towards having this tendency to be biased, so we have to be really active in making sure that we can create some change. So if you think of a group that maybe you have an unconscious bias to, maybe a male teacher, or a female pilot, or a young doctor, and we talk about visualizing positive interactions with that group. I heard a TED Talk recently where a speaker mentioned she was on a flight and she heard a female pilot on the intercom. And she was so excited at first because she was like, way to go. I don't hear a lot of female pilots. But as soon as the plane hit some turbulence and she heard the pilot's voice again, she found herself wishing that the pilot was a man. And she had to stop and be like, whoa, why? Are men better pilots? Or is this unconscious bias making itself known in a moment of fear? So she talked about how she realized that bias and she experienced both perspectives of the accomplishment and the threat. And the fact remained that, I mean, like it or not, the pilot is a woman, and to arrive at her destination and not freak out the whole rest of the way, she needed to let go of that bias and trust that the pilot regardless of gender, was trained and skilled enough to fly the plane. So implicit biases are pervasive. We all have them. We've all tried to not have them. Judges, everyone. They're related, but distinct in terms of they're not mutually exclusive. They may reinforce one another. And they don't necessarily align with our declared beliefs. I might have bias that is very deeply held and in direct opposition to what I would say to you right now. And that's not bad or wrong. That just means that I need to do more work of stepping back and looking at that bias when I'm confronted with it. So I'm gonna stop.
Got a couple questions, Zahra.
Yes, I
Maggie
see.
has a question, and then there was a couple questions in the chat that I'll read unless the people who asked those questions want to raise their hands while Maggie is talking or asking her question. Go ahead, Maggie. You are unmuted.
Hi, Zahra. Just wanted to say thanks for doing this class. This seems like you have a lot of different content this time than what I'm used to, so that's kind of exciting. And actually, I only stuck my hand up because I wanted to call out the fact that there were questions in chat. But as your Pelican, I want to say, great job.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. Okay. Chat questions.
Questions in the chat is, given the defined, it's a sort of a two-part question from two different people. So given the defined, how do we approach the fact that the crown is decided by heavy armored combat, which excludes participants based on physical ability and economic ability? And how do we cope with the fact that the crown is decided by a very ableist and sexist contest, and the powers given to crowns are unique and overwhelmingly controlling for whole kingdoms?
Okay, so this is probably a class in and of itself, right? This could be a 90-minute discussion. And I can't give you any hard and fast answers here. I can give you my opinions. So we're imitating a monarchy, which unfortunately was not in and of itself extremely welcoming to everyone. I do think that there are conversations happening about how to expand what crown looks like in different kingdoms. People have raised these concerns. It is problematic that we have this overarching authority and we can only decide it in one or two ways effectively, because you can fight or you can be fought for. And that's about it. I would say that the physical ability and economic ability aspect is pretty much a limiting factor across a lot of what we do in the SCA. It is something that we've tried to make accommodations for in as many ways as we can, but realistically speaking, there's only so much that we can do, right? We can attempt to bring more economic parity to what we do by having things like loaner garb, by offering things like carpooling and crash space and whatnot, and allowing more people to get to places. But to some degree, it is in itself exclusionary by activity as to what you can engage in. I would, and I can only speak personally, I would like to see eventually the authority of the crown dispersed in ways that would make it a little bit more inclusive, but I don't know what the best way is for that to look like, because it seems like every way you turn, there's more issues from different perspectives. It's a good question. It's not one that I have a great answer for. It's something that is an ongoing discussion at all levels of the SCA. Like, I can promise you, this is something that is being discussed from the top down. Everyone is asking this question of how do we make this a little bit more equitable? And no one really has a great answer as to how we do that without changing the foundation of how we've constructed the game. And if we need to change the foundation of how we've constructed the game, how do we do that in a way that still keeps the heart of who we are? I'm gonna scroll down because I wasn't able to look at chat very much. How to cope with the, oh, okay, so that's what you had just asked. Conversations about new crown attorney formats were vehemently shut down, got ugly. I've seen them in a lot of different places. I can believe that they've been shut down in various aspects. They're gonna get ugly because it kind of shakes the foundation of what we've set ourselves up as. And I'm not saying that's bad. Sometimes we have to ask really hard questions to grow. I'm not saying that's good. I don't have a good answer, so it's very hard for me to come out and say, we should definitely do this, because I don't have that perfect answer that I'm sitting on that's gonna make this better for everyone. Join the society knowing this is not democracy. Modern bias makes it difficult to deal with on some levels. I agree. We're trying to apply principles of equity and inclusion, me more than just about anyone. But it means having to accept that there are some aspects of our society that are inherently exclusive. Past Crown, I mean, we've had this class and people have talked about the concept of peerage and how everyone can't be a peer. And that's true. Everyone can't be a peer. And sometimes, unfortunately, it is time limitations, economic limitations. There's no good answer for that. It's just understanding that we've set ourselves up in such a way where we can be as equitable and inclusive as we can, but still accept that there are some aspects of our game which will only be open to those that have a little bit higher income, a little bit more disposable time. It's a good conversation to have, though. I think that we can continue to move towards better, even if we can't find perfect, by continuing to have those conversations, which, yes, they do get heated really, really fast. Everyone else is muted but me, so this is real chill for me. But if we were having an ongoing discussion in person, it's entirely possible that by now one of you would have jumped across the circle and started like shaking me. And I would get it. I mean, I'm not giving you anything good to work with here. But I think the conversations are worth having. If you have suggestions, I, as always, suggest that you write to the bod. They're having these conversations. As much as they might be getting shut down in other places, we are actively always moving towards what's best for the society. So if you have thoughts, I would suggest sharing them. Are there any other questions, thoughts? If people want to weigh in, we have enough time if people want to raise their hand and add in anything with the conversation. People who worked hard to win crown feel attacked. People who face obstacles feel unheard. That's a huge problem. And I've seen both sides of that, and both perspectives have some really valid points. There are people who have won crown and then put in a disproportionately high amount of work to complete the job that they've taken on for themselves. And of course, they do feel attacked when people say, hey, you got that because of this level of privilege. And there are people who feel as though they may never get the opportunity to reign. And the reality is that most of us won't. We're talking about two very small little positions that rotate at best 4 months, most cases 6 months. Not everyone's going to be able to do it, unfortunately. When the bar of standards keeps getting raised, it makes for very disappointed wannabe peers. That is true. There have been a few peerage roundtables, at least in the Middle Kingdom, where people have talked with peers about what the standards are, what achieving peerage looks like. And I know that there are many peers, my own peers included, who are very vocal about making sure that the bar is not raised to an unreasonable degree. People want to gatekeep to some degree because they want to continue to keep their particular group as richly accomplished as possible. But it's very easy to kind of keep nudging that bar as we as a society get better at things like research and the physics of fighting, and we learn how to do things that we couldn't have done 20 years ago. So those conversations are happening as well. I think they're very important. I think communication is probably the most important thing that we can do to make sure that the society continues to evolve in a way that serves everyone. Locational bias sneaks up on you, particularly. You guys can totally unmute. You don't have to only type. Talk about accidental Australian locating. I don't know how to use it. Thank you. Privileged moments that happen. Recognize the majority. Yes.
East Coast is very much more connected than the others in many ways, and especially mainland versus Crescent Isles, and
that makes sense. And really, I guess the communication of recognizing that and saying, oh, well, how do we account for this, is all you can really do. If you could come up with a way to just teleport people around, I'm sure that would be the solution. We're not there yet. So yeah. That's a really
There was talk once or twice of the Western Australia, which is about half the continent, becoming its own principality, but that didn't go anywhere. And there's been lots of different discussions, but oh, sorry, someone else has their hand up. Is that?
No, keep going. Really, I only know a little bit about LOCAC, but I understand that is a real hard speed bump to get over.
Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, and bits of Antarctica, which had a very amusing war with Caid. Well, not war with Caid over a couple of years back.
That's awesome. I didn't know that we actually had any.
But very large geographical area, roughly the same as the entire continental United States. So you can see the geographical.
Yeah, no, that's astoundingly challenging. And yeah, I would think a principality might be a viable option, but again, if that's not being reflected in what the populace thinks, then
I don't know population numbers, but it's also a large amount of the logistics that would be involved, because with the principality, you not only report at the local level and the kingdom level, but also principality level on top of that. So unless you've got enough people active that you can report on all three levels, principality doesn't work. Yep. And the major cities in Western Australia are quite spread out, so it's harder to be like the main groups that I knew of were at least a few hours drive apart, which meant that it was harder to keep things as connected as a principality would need to be. But this is all stuff I'm hearing secondhand from discussions I've heard of from lurking in the background. So,
no, that is definitely challenging. I think I knew, but I had not actively thought about just what that kind of locational disparity would do to a kingdom that needs to remain as unified as possible, but is working across this huge expanse of land. Wow. Yeah, no, that's incredibly challenging. And I'm guessing that people find it even more challenging to engage in things like Crown or anything else like that, because it could be clear across the country, and
it also
make that event.
Yeah, it also affects how, again, we're going back to discussion groups. It also affects how awards are handed out, how often, like on a baronial, on a group level, it's fine, or well, not necessarily fine, but you know, but on a kingdom level, on a peerage level, it's a lot harder for those people to actually be given awards or receive recognition from the Crown or from other groups even.
Yeah,
just because it's that much harder there's less opportunities for the Crown to get out there, because it's like from Sydney to Perth is like 8-hour flight.
Right. So people are not necessarily able to see everything.
And with the majority of Crowns coming from the far more connected West Coast.
Yeah, I can see how that would be enormously challenging.
Yeah. Sorry if this sounds like I'm just dumping on
technology. I'm sorry?
Sorry if this sounds like I'm just dumping on things and everything without actually offering solutions. But.
No, it's a good point to bring up. Like I said, these conversations are important. Bringing them up so that we can talk about them is incredibly important. I'm hoping that You know, we've seen what modern technology can do to hold a society like ours together. And I think as much as we all really want to get back to events and eventing in person, I'm hoping that some elements of what we've started here will remain, because that will give people the opportunity to engage even if they can't be physically present for a variety of reasons. When we get back into doing events, it will not go back to the way things were before immediately. There will be an element of risk, and there will be people who cannot afford to take that risk for an SCA event. And I do want people to continue to feel included in the SCA as we move back into it. So I'm gonna go on to the next question, but that was a really good note. Locational bias can really lead to some people being very isolated, and locational privilege can lead to some people having a slightly easier path on the way to things than they otherwise would. Okay, so I'm gonna, where are those conversations happening? I see a lot online. I see a lot in person though. I don't know. I'm a little biased because people come to me and start these conversations, and I'm like, that's a great conversation. So I can't necessarily tell you where to find them.
Here's my concern. Facebook is not safe.
Nothing is very safe online.
Facebook is like nice chit chat, but for serious conversations, it's not safe.
Yeah, you get way too many people just piling in on everything. And I say that as someone who has occasionally gotten out of hand on Facebook and who has seen friends and family get out of hand on Facebook.
And even email lists and little things like that, it's just not conducive to really understanding and seeing all of the nonverbal cues and everything that you can see in an in-person conversation. Even Zoom like this and other collaboration online tools, those are better when you can see and hear and use all those communication tools that we have. So when you're minimized down into little tiny bits of text, it is not safe. It's not safe enough for these kinds of conversations. And we see that because those conversations get so heated so quickly, and they get just shut down, and people get so angry, and they, oh my God, it's painful. I mean, I started to just sort of tiptoe into that just a little bit gently. And there was so much bile that got just thrown into the conversation. I said, okay, not doing it. And I am a big believer in diversity and working hard to achieve equity. So the thing I want to ask for and see if maybe it could happen is SCA Inc. sponsored online conversations in Zoom or an equivalent, because I want those kinds of conversations to happen in a place where there's a moderator and everybody gets a chance to, you know, say their piece. There are plenty of people who say, this is my dream. I've always wanted to be a knight in shining armor, and I've wanted to be a king, and I've worked hard to get there. And I'm sorry that 90% of the rest of the community can't do it, but I can, and I want to do it, and I want to live my dream. And that's what the SCA is about. And I get that. And there's so many problems with it. I want to at least be safe talking about it. I do not feel safe right now, and I don't have a venue. And, you know, I'm good with tech. I'm really happy to help. I'm very good at online communication. So, you know, I'm absolutely ready to put my money where my mouth is and say, I will help make it happen. It's just, I need top cover. I do not want to just venture out onto my own and say, I'd like to have a nice little conversation. Anybody want to come? No, I will get skewered by doing that. So what I really would love to see is SCA Inc. level sponsored opportunities to have that kind of conversation that's safe, where I'm not gonna get trampled on by other people, especially, you know, the fact that I'd kind of like to be a peer one day, and I get evaluated on these things, and I try to be super, super careful about how I engage in group conversations like this. And I really believe everybody needs a fair say. And right now we ain't got it. Facebook isn't enough. So, I mean, conversations need to happen. I completely agree with you. I'm right on there. And I know for me, my own little personal self, I need help. And so, I'd like to put that on the table and see if if that, rolls up and has any ideas. And absolutely call me if you need tech help. I can do that.
Sure. Okay. Well, so I've held a couple roundtables. My class is here. We have a moderator. So venues like this are good. Email me after this. Tell me a little bit more about the formatting you're thinking of, whether it's something like a roundtable, a Q&A. I report directly to the president of the SCA. He's done a couple of interviews. He's gone on a couple of, he was on Live on Kaid where he could talk to people. I think he would be very, very open to doing a sort of Zoom Q&A. I say, don't kill me, John. But I'll talk to him about it, and I'll talk to the Society Seneschal about it, and I'll talk to the bot about it. I will roll that up, and I will see what people think, and I think that we can get at least a few people to engage. I do want to be clear that their oversight may not be what people hope it will be. They may be able to answer some of your questions, but some of those peerage-specific questions are going to be a little bit more kingdom-specific. But I can help facilitate conversations there too, if you would like the assistance in doing the outreach. And I can offer the help. I mean, I have a Zoom account. I can help facilitate that. If you guys want a peerage roundtable held with certain people in your kingdom, I'm happy to help out with that as well. But email me after this, and we will talk more about it.
Yeah, I'm not thinking so much in terms of peerage, but just getting on the table.
Yeah.
The thoughts and feelings and ideas and feelings of inequity that everybody feels, and not so much a Q&A, but like a roundtable, a town hall hearing, because there is no safe venue to do that.
I think a town hall would be great. We could probably set up, there's a thing called Pigeonhole where people can submit questions in advance. I think it would get enough interest that we would have to do a little bit of a more advanced thing and then talk about specific topics. But maybe we could talk about a recurring town hall. Again, email me. I will talk to people and do everything in my power to make that happen.
Thank you very much. That sounds like great time.
All right.
And has her hand raised.
Yes. And Detone.
You're unmuted, Anne.
Hi. I suppose I just wanted to chuck my 2 cents in. For those of you who don't know me, I'm actually Costello. I'm the Society Social Media Officer. So the conversations around safety in online spaces are something that I can tell you are actively happening. Jess and I work very closely and very often. Some of the things you need to think about, I suppose, as well in terms of bias in online spaces, is that people will quite often associate behavior with tools. So Facebook is the problem, Twitter is the problem, everything. Unfortunately, we're both the problem and the solution. The behaviors that you see online get exacerbated at times by people's biases around the tool and how they behave. We are looking at official spaces. If you are seeing unacceptable behavior in online spaces, call it out, report it to a moderator, report it to your seneschals, let people know. Official SCA online spaces in any channel are official SCA spaces, and we have a zero tolerance for that kind of behavior. Now, we're not going to always get it right because we're learning and growing and evolving, but we want people to feel safe, and we need people to feel safe because that's how we have fun. So I really want to say that we are looking at these issues and we're looking at how we can support conversations. I can tell you that, yes, I too may have spoken to John about what about an AMA or another sort of live from the SCA, and I think Jess and I might hit him from both sides. Like, he's pretty good at defense, so we'll see how it goes, but he's really open to it. So, but if you have any questions or any ideas, please email me at socialmedia@sca.org. Our game is for everybody, and this is something that we're actually finding has been a huge opportunity that has come out of the virtual space environment, because constraints sometimes force us to grow and change. And the whole global pandemic thing has been a constraint none of us ever anticipated, but has created opportunities for us to innovate and grow and share. So the SCA virtual classroom is an official space. So, you know, your kingdom things like this amazing Royal University of Midrealm is an official space. So these are amazing things that are meaning we have people from all over the known world able to be in classes with people like Jess and other amazing SCA people. So please come up with ideas, share those ideas and tell us, but also call out the things that we need to know about. Because if we don't know about problems, we can't start putting solutions in for it.
Thank you. And again, that's Anne. I'm so used to calling you Brayden in my head. SCA, Facebook, social media at SCA.org. She is the social media officer for the SCA. So social media at SCA.org, equity at SCA.org. Email us. We will talk to people. I'm gonna really quickly run through and see if anyone had any comments on psychological safety. Absolutely. Context and nuance in Facebook conversations, very difficult. All online conversations, and then you're typing a response and other people are already typing and they've moved on and you're not done, and it's crazy. Imagine a cis white male trying to start this kind of a conversation. I'm told as an outsider, some will never accept me. Others will give me kudos for trying. Others will crucify me unless what I say is spot on valid. Yes, people will crucify you no matter what, especially as a member of a privileged group trying to speak to members of marginalized groups. That does not mean that you should not continue to be active in conversation. What it does mean is that you have an opportunity to use your platform as a pedestal for those who are engaged in the conversation and who are part of a marginalized group. That's always the best recommendation that I can get if you're feeling a little uncertain about what the best way is to affect change in a community as an ally to that community. Elevate the voices of the people in that community who are already kind of doing the work and are not being heard or who are being shouted down, etc. Because it's really their message that you're trying to give a boost to. And as a cis white male, quite frankly, your voice will reach people that mine won't, that other people won't. There are people who will not listen to a word I am saying because it is me who is saying it. And while that is absolutely just the worst, it's true, your voice can go further than mine in a lot of ways. It is hard though. I mean, you're never gonna make everyone happy, right? You can be the sweetest peach in the world and you're gonna run into someone who doesn't like fruit. There are people who very much don't like what I'm doing right now. There are people who think that what I'm doing right now is unnecessary or overblown. I find that people usually don't know what I'm doing and they kind of have made assumptions that I'm like, I don't know, running around with like a lasso, like grabbing white dudes and pulling them off the field or something. I don't know what they think I'm doing. I'm not doing it. When they find out how not zesty what I do is, they usually shut up and leave because they're bored or whatever. But yeah, no, it can be really hard. It can be really thankless work. But thank you. Thank you for trying. I really do suggest boosting the voices of those who are in that group that you're allied to. And don't be discouraged by individuals. I mean, if you are actively working for change and you're listening to the feedback you're getting, it's okay to be wrong sometimes. We just have to acknowledge it, improve, keep working. You're on the right track. Easy to say, oh, that's Facebook, and brush it out. Yes, well said, Anne. Talk to others in my realm about what they say, what am I saying, etc. I need more specificity to answer you there. I do want to finish up my last bit, so either type it out and then I'll circle back, or raise your hand and we can have a quick chat, or email me and we can talk more about kind of what that looks like and some practical ways to elevate the voices of marginalized groups. And I'm happy to go more into that. But I'm going to finish the last little bit of what my class involves, which is microaggressions. And then there should still be plenty of time for more discussion afterwards. So if you have questions, type them out, gather them up. We will return to our open chat soon. But last, sorry, I wish that was zestier. So microaggressions and micro inequities. last bit. So I'm going to start this by talking to you about a webcomic. There is a webcomic called Hyperbole and a Half. If you have ever seen the little graphics of the stick figure girl going, do all the things, or whatever, all the things, that is from Hyperbole and a Half. It was active. Oh my God, it was like 10 years ago. But it's great. It's funny. It's very good. I want to talk to you. This is it. I can give you a link to it, but it's called The Sneaky Hate Spiral. So I want you to imagine I'm giving you a day, right? So we're sleeping, we're awake because there's a loud bird right outside our window. Oh, all right, whatever. So we look at our alarm and it's 40 minutes before it's supposed to go off. All right, well, we can try to maybe doze off again, but now I'm awake because this bird, so I don't really doze off, and then I finally am getting there, and then the alarm goes off, and it's like La Bamba or something that's really stuck in your head. So you're in the shower, and you're like, oh my God, this is the worst. And suddenly the water's cold because, I don't know, someone else showered before you, but you have no more hot water, so that's fine. You get out of the shower, you go get coffee. Oh no, you forgot to set your coffee pot. That's fine. You'll set it, you'll go get dressed, but the shirt you wanted to wear is dirty. That's fine. So we get in our car and there's traffic, and we get to work and our computer is slow to boot. And we see that we've missed a meeting. And all day, it's just a series of these little tiny things that has you just angrier and angrier until finally, it really doesn't take anything at all to set you off. And next thing you know, you're in Subway screaming at the sandwich artist that the cheese triangles don't go that way, Linda. And this poor woman is like, oh my God, take your American sub and go. So that's the Sneaky Hate Spiral. The Sneaky Hate Spiral is a series of infinitesimal events that by themselves are nothing, right? Mild inconvenience. But when categorized within the larger scope of your no good, very bad day, are the absolute worst thing. It's the mountain, right? So I want you to take that concept and now, instead of a day, this is all of your life. And instead of just little instances of the fickle universe, this is your peers, your friends, your family, everyone around you making little tiny jabs at some aspect of what makes you who you are. Often something that you don't have a lot of control over. And you hear it every day for years until finally you're like, oh my God. And people are like, wow, what an overreaction. So that's a microaggression. I can put the link for the Sneaky Hate Spiral into the event. It's super funny. I probably did not do it justice. You should totally read it. But in 1973, Mary Rowe coined the phrase micro-inequity. She defined it officially as apparently small events, which are often ephemeral and hard to prove, events that are covert, often unintentional, frequently unrecognized by the perpetrator, which occur wherever people are perceived to be different. Micro-inequity and microaggression are used pretty interchangeably in academia, but usually micro-inequity is kind of a slight that demeans or marginalizes the recipient, whereas a microaggression is more stereotyping and denigration. But like I said, you'll hear them used interchangeably. They are tremendously subtle sometimes. I have some examples on this sheet. These are all things that people have told me that they have heard or that I have heard myself. And they are things like, well, it's great that you don't have any accent. Or, I never would have guessed that you were gay. Or, he's a Christian, but you know, he's very open-minded. I've gotten a lot of, you don't sound black, or you are the whitest black person I know. Tremendously frustrating. People have done, you would be amazed at the things that people will say to other people. One of my favorite examples in a strictly SCA context was from a duke in my kingdom who attended a TOC, or a tournament of chivalry, where all the knights show up and they fight with different unbelts and they can give feedback. It's very cool. It's just a very cool thing, right? And an unbelt who did not know this duke very well, and this duke is amazing at what he does. He is a tremendous fighter. He is flown all around to go teach. And this unbelt said, "It is so inspiring to see the old knights out here with us. It's just really great. Thanks." He didn't love that comment. It was not as flattering as I'm sure this unbelt intended. It's not helpful to make these kinds of comments. But often the people making them don't realize that they're engaging in these kinds of microaggressions. They often think that they're giving you a compliment. I am certain that the people who continuously tell me how good my English is are trying to pay me a compliment. English is all I speak. It better be good. But their implication is that they look at me and they assume something about my level of knowledge of English, my level of knowledge about other languages. And same thing when we talk about, you know, oh, you're the whitest Black person I know. Because in their heads, they have an idea of what it means to be Black. And I don't fit into it. And unfortunately, that is one where you can kind of tell that their idea is maybe not the most popular. But they don't always realize that they're doing it. One of the comments I have on here as well is, if you want to research your heritage, you could portray a slave. That is something that people have said actually in more than one way. It is a lack of knowledge about history, about what slavery is and what it looks like, about the idea that there were people of color who were, in fact, quite wealthy in Europe. It's a lot of different types of lack of knowledge, but it doesn't make it less offensive to hear, and it doesn't make my instinctual response any less when I hear it after, you know, the fourth or fifth time. So, these are all statements. I want to also call out the idea that microaggressions can be actions as well. If you are perpetually being interrupted when no one else around you is, if people are making eye contact with the person right here, even though you're the one talking to them, if they're suddenly checking your phone when it's, or checking their phone, sorry, when it's your turn to talk, if there's a group of people that go out after practice and it's everyone but you, every single time, if you are continuously confusing people of a certain ethnicity with another person of the same ethnicity, that happens a lot. So microaggressions can look like a few different things. They can be very, very difficult to address because they are not always coming from a place of malice. The perpetrator of a microaggression may or may not be aware of the harmful effects of their behavior. The comments are usually a result of that unconscious bias that we discussed. So we have to be aware. We have to be aware of how our statements might be interpreted. We have to talk about the idea of our intent and its effect on the person who we're engaged with. Microaggressions are, again, they're very, very difficult to kind of address effectively when you see them around you, even, because you have no idea how the statement was taken by that person. And sometimes highlighting it in the moment is not the right answer because you're calling more attention to it at the time and potentially making a situation unsafe for the person who you're trying to help. So that's something that I think is better covered in the concept of like bystander intervention, which is a different course. But I want to bring awareness to what these are so that we can recognize them and hopefully start being self-reflective when we find ourselves making statements that are coming out of a place of bias, because these are some of the negative ways that they might manifest. So that is the class. If anyone has questions, I'll check chat now. we can talk about that. We can go back to what we were talking about before. But now is the time to kind of type out, raise your hand, weigh in, give thoughts. We have another 18 minutes scheduled, so there's definitely time to get into some of these. So I'm gonna scroll. We'll email shortly. But you don't look autistic. Yes. You're native, but you're so pale. Yes. Yes, all of these. You know what these are like. A lot of us have experienced them. Yes. Just yes. Yes, yes, yes. Very annoying. Especially in my job, I've seen a lot of judgments based on how well people speak, especially when English isn't their first language. That is frustrating. How good is anyone when they're learning a new language? You should get excited at achievement instead of a lack of ability in something new. Yes. I mean, you said it. It's incredibly disheartening to watch people continuously critique as you're attempting to grow a skill that is not at all easy. So yes, absolutely. All right, questions, thoughts. We are at the end of the class. So if anyone has anything, now is the time. If not, thank you so much for coming. You can email me at equity@sca.org. Family member of a newly out trans died, but was put up by parents in the old name, dead naming them. Yes. So that is, I would say probably it falls into the scope of a microaggression, because again, you can kind of see why the person may not have intended it maliciously, but it is traumatic and it is disrespectful and it is hurtful to the memory of that person. So yes, I mean, that's a very good example of one. An unfortunate example, but a very good one. Okay. So thoughts, opinions, raise your hand. Okay, we're good. Thank you guys for coming. Email me if you have further questions. I will teach my classes. I will post about them to various groups. I really appreciate everyone for coming and asking questions and engaging. And yeah, I look forward to meeting you guys in person someday. That would be wonderful. So have a good night.